Hi everyone, welcome to week 5 and actually week 6 for the paper progress assignments. Today we're going to be talking about kind of putting everything together and how you put together your questions bank with your database assignment so that you can start really crafting what I believe to be the most efficient paper that is both high quality and effective for creating and articulating a strong thesis. So let's start with a couple of misconceptions. First is the idea that you want to start with a thesis. That's not actually the way that scholars work. You may start with a hypothesis or a hypothesis, hypothetical. You may have some sense of what you think you're going to argue, but you want to remain open to the fact that what you think you're going to argue may change or evolve, or you may come up with a better thesis. One of the best things that I see with students often is whenever they come in frustrated thinking that their paper is no longer terrific because they found some detail that changes what they thought to be true, but when I hear them articulate what they're worried about, it actually proves that their thesis just got a whole lot better. So to give you an example, I had a student who was writing about social workers in pop culture, and she was saying that initially that social workers in pop culture were cold and unfeeling, and so she was studying this thing, and then she found out that in all of the representations of social workers, there was a switch for them where they got a little more information and became not so cold or unfeeling anymore. And she was saying, oh goodness, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to scrap my whole paper. It's not what I thought was true. And in fact, what she just said was my thesis just got a lot better because her thesis, instead of being they're cold and unthinking, became they start cold and unthinking. And then when they get more information, social workers are shown to be really versatile and really willing to change their mind and perspective and rethink the way they feel and act and behave. So she came up with a much better thesis as a result of that. So we're going to start through this process. I want to talk you through what we've got in front of us here. This is a questions bank. This is a bank that I actually created to talk about my work. For you all, it's going to shift. So you're talking about short stories, maybe literature, and you're talking about gender, maybe place, maybe some other questions. And what you're going to notice here is that my questions are, instead of literature or short stories, I'm talking about stand-up comedians or comedy. And I'm asking questions about gender, but specifically about manhood. So each of the questions is some different angle to try to understand how the comedian addresses these topics. So we've got how does this comedian address manhood? How does he talk about himself? How does he talk about other men? What themes emerge as he talks about his own manhood? Are there any important patterns in this discussion of manhood? How does he talk about women? How does he talk about women's treatment of men? What about men's treatment of women? These are just some of the questions that we have in front of us, and they're how we're going to create great body paragraphs. And that's really key here, that I want you to remember that what we're dealing with here are body paragraphs. We're not talking about your introduction. We're not worried about that yet. We're going to get to the introduction later. We don't need our good introduction just yet. What we need are good, solid claims that we can build a thesis from or look at to create our thesis. So we're talking only about body paragraphs. We're going to worry about the conclusion and the introduction later. For those of you out there who are in my course, you will have already created a database. This is my database that we're working with. This is a stand-up comedian named Christopher Titus. He has a special called Norman Rockwell is Bleeding. And what I did is I did just what you did with your story. So I sat down and I watched this stand-up special, and anytime he said anything or anytime I saw a detail that could help me answer the question, how does this comedian deal with manhood? I wrote down those quotes, passages, or details. So you're going to notice here that we've got all of these, they're already in quotes, and I do that so that I can copy and paste them directly into my paper when the time is right. Same database that you will have. You've gone through and done this and done a good job with it. I've seen all of your databases. It looks like you've got a lot to pull from. So we've got questions here. We've got evidence to start trying to answer those questions. And I want to talk us through the idea of flow. And we hear this idea of flow, and I want us to talk through what that actually means and how it shapes what we're about to do next. So right here, what we have is, it's a Word document, very familiar to everybody. This is about body paragraph structure, and we're going to talk about why this is the best structure for you to use, and I'll talk you through all the different places where you'll see this at work. You're going to open your body paragraphs with a claim. You're going to provide evidence for that claim, and then you're going to provide analysis of that claim. These are all important steps in the process, I want you to think of yourself a little bit like an attorney preparing for a trial. So what an attorney does is he or she sits down with a box of evidence. So they actually start the thought process here. And their big question is, what happened? That's it. What happened? So they have all of this evidence and they're starting here, and eventually they're going to get to their claim, which is, this is what happened. That's the answer. But notice that the order is inverted. It's not the same as they arrived at it. And that's really important for us, because what we're doing is we're repackaging what we've done for an audience. We're trying to think of what is the order they needed. If you're sitting in a jury, so you're the audience to that attorney, and the attorney gives you all this evidence, you may think, wow, that is really interesting evidence. What are they trying to say with it? And then they give you the claim. Then you'd have to go back through all the evidence and make sure that what they said was true, was right, was accurate, was sound. That's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that as we provide claims, we ground them in evidence. This is different than what you're probably used to, but it's a far more effective method for creating a really great paper from the get-go. So we've got these claims, we've got evidence, and there's no surprise here. Your claims here are going to be, type this in here, answers to your questions from your question bank. Capitalizing database here, although database technically would not be. And here analysis is the breakdown. And this is really important for us to understand all of these different pieces at work, because they're going to shape for us how you're going to put together your paper. So let's go back to, we're going to go back over here to our question bank. And what we're going to do is we're going to find any one of the places where we can answer one of these questions. So for example, let's think about the idea of, how does this comedian talk about himself? That's an easy enough question, right? So we look over here and we're going to start looking through this, right? So he talks about himself, man-boy line. He says he decided not to cross the man-boy line, and that's a really important one. Let's start with this one here, though, because what he says in this quote seems really important. He says, I love being from a screwed-up family because nothing bothers me anymore, nothing bugs me. Once you've driven a drunk father to mom's parole hearing, what else is there? So here, let's copy it up. Let's see what happens. We're going to put that evidence right here. We'll make it a little larger for you, so hopefully you can read it. And let's change this so that we know that we're dealing with two different things. This is our paragraph that we're building, right? And so we're trying to work through our paragraph. This is all going to come out. That's not what we need. So here, let's look a little more closely at this, right? So our question is, how does this comedian talk about himself? And so here, our answer would be, there's our answer. So we've got our pieces starting to come together really nicely here. We've got a claim that he claims he's the product of a quote, screwed up family. Then we've got our evidence of it, and now we need to start thinking about how we're going to break it down from there. Let's make this all the same font. I'm a little bit obsessed with making sure everything is all consistent, right? Let's shrink this font so it's the same size as the other. That looks about right. Does everybody see what I've got right there? What we want to do is lead into this this quote, and we've got it right there. We've put it right in there. We've introduced it for the audience, and now we're going to think about this sort of breakdown of the evidence. When we talk about breaking down the evidence, I want you to think a little bit like an ESPN announcer. So what an ESPN announcer will do is they're going to answer a question. That's their claim, right? How did the Atlanta Falcons blow their lead in the Super Bowl? So their answer is going to be the Atlanta Falcons blew their lead in the Super Bowl because their offensive line failed to protect Matt Ryan. Then they're going to show you a clip, that's your evidence, and then they're going to zoom in and they're going to show you exactly how that failure took place. So that's what we're going to do here is we're going to look more closely at this quote and we're going to try to figure out exactly what's going on. Not just that he talks about this, but how he talks about this. So here we can say, this is just one example here. Let me see if I can shrink this so we can kind of be on the same page. One more, we'll change it to Times New Roman so we have everything all kind of coming together. Let's start shrinking this up a little bit. So this is just a start. This is, if I were writing this paper, you want this section, the analysis portion, to be about 4 to 6 sentences, roughly speaking, for this paper. So you're going to keep looking to this quote to start figuring out what you can say from this quote. Now remember, everything you say needs to come from this quote. You don't want to say something like, this shows that men are really okay with alcoholism. This doesn't actually show that. This shows that this one comedian is making jokes about it, but that doesn't say anything about men. So you want to be really careful about the ways that you stay on topic. Everything you say here needs to be seen directly here, and you want to add 4 or 6 sentences that really break down what you're talking about here. That's how you're going to put together great body paragraphs. And then the next thing you're going to do is repeat this process to create another. Now let me show you finally what it looks like when we glue it all together. Remember, we have claim, evidence, and analysis. And also remember that this last paragraph is going to get developed. This last part of the paragraph is going to get developed by looking more closely, even more fully from here. So don't give up right here. Keep talking about your evidence. So keep looking into this section to see what else you can get. We could talk about the idea that nothing bothers him anymore. We could talk about the fact that he has this repetition of nothing. We have this idea that he is the one taking care of his parents. Maybe that's part of it, that the roles seem to be reversed, right? So he's the one who's driving his father, not the other way around. There are a lot of different things we can talk about here. So if we were to continue this paragraph, we would develop it even more fully. But then when we're ready, we're just going to start deleting this stuff here. And next thing you know, we've got our body paragraph written and crafted. And again, remember that you're going to indent that first line. And next thing you know, we're right there. We've got our body paragraph built. So what we do from here, and this is really key for you to understand so that you can move on to the next question, is we're going to look at what we've got here. We've got the idea of his father, we've got his mother, so we've got some potential places where we can go next. Let's look to our questions and see what else we get. And it looks like our next logical question is this: how does he talk about other men? And it seems really important that we talk about the fact that the next paragraph there. So this is us leading from one paragraph to the next by going to our questions and walking our way through. It may have been that we talk about men's treatment of women next, so it's not that this is in order, but we want to be thinking of what's the next logical step for us. We're going to work our way through all of the database evidence and information until we get to our page length. So this is the way that we're going to build our paper by building body paragraphs, opening with claims, following with evidence, giving good analysis. And analysis, again, is no magic. It's just talking and breaking down that evidence that we have in front of us more fully, and then going to the next logical question. But remember that when you go to the next logical question, you tell why you're going to the next logical question here in this sentence, and that will give you those transitions that you need. We'll talk more about transitions next week, but for right now, this is enough. You're going to work on this and you're going to build up 1.5 pages of your body paragraphs for next week. 1.5 pages. Remember that it's double spaced, so this is single spaced, so don't panic about that. If you have any questions about everything, let me know. Good luck, and I'm here for you if you need anything. Thanks again, everybody. Good luck.